The ocean is calm tonight, glass smooth, silent. But silence has never meant safety. In the deep bays of Alaska, one night in 1958, the calm ended in a single heartbeat. A sound like thunder tore through the mountains. Fishermen looked up and saw an entire hillside collapse into the sea. What rose next was impossible. A wall of water, higher than a skyscraper, more than 1,700 feet tall, racing toward them at the speed of sound. It erased forests, lifted boats hundreds of meters into the air, and left behind a story that scientists would struggle to believe. This was the tallest tsunami ever recorded, but it wasn't the most important one, because another wave, smaller in height, but far greater in reach, would one day cross oceans, reshape nations, and force humanity to rethink its place beside the sea. Every one of the 5 tsunamis you're about to see tells a piece of that story. Manau Yudinmarnen, of how the ocean reminds us who's in charge. Let's begin in Alaska. Where the mountains fell, the sea rose, and the world witnessed what happens when gravity and water meet. It was just past 10 at night when the mountains of southeast Alaska began to move. 2 fishermen, Bill and Sonny Ulrich, were anchored near the mouth of Lituya Bay, a narrow fjord surrounded by steep granite cliffs and ancient spruce forests. They had spent the evening repairing nets, the water around them calm as glass. Then the earth shuddered. Across the bay, a slab of rock nearly the size of Manhattan tore loose from the mountain face and crashed into the fjord. In less than a second, 90 million tons of rock hit the water. The impact displaced so much sea that the bay itself seemed to rise. The wave that followed climbed the opposite wall of the fjord, scraping every tree, every patch of soil, up to 1,720 feet above the waterline, higher than the Empire State Building. Bill and Sonny never saw the full height. All they knew was that the world behind them exploded in sound. Their boat was lifted like a toy and hurled over a spit of land that had stood hundreds of feet above sea level only moments before. They survived, barely, drifting on a sea littered with splintered trunks and floating soil. When dawn came, the once green hillsides were bare gray scars. Entire forests had been shaved off the mountains. Scientists later called it a megatsunami, a term reserved for waves born not from earthquakes, but from massive landslides. The narrow geometry of Lituya Bay had amplified the impact, funneling all that displaced water into one vertical surge. It was the tallest wave ever measured by humans. Yet, remarkably, its destruction was confined to that single, remote valley. And that's the twist of Lituya Bay. For all its unimaginable height, it killed only 2 people. A record of nature's scale, but not its wrath. Because a true oceanic tsunami doesn't need mountains to fall. It only needs the planet itself to move. And when it does, the wave doesn't stop at a fjord's edge. It crosses oceans, carries cities with it, and leaves behind a different kind of silence. 57 years after Lituya Bay, Alaska stirred again. But this time, no one heard it happen. Deep inside the mountains, where a glacier had been retreating for decades, a slope weakened. The ice that had once held the rock in place was gone. And one quiet October evening, the mountainside gave way. Roughly 180 million tons of rock slid down into Taan Fiord and struck the water with the force of an asteroid. There were no fishermen this time, no eyewitnesses, no photograph of the moment, just sensors around the world that recorded a low, muffled tremor. And then silence. It wasn't until the following year that scientists, studying satellite imagery, noticed something strange. The coastline had changed shape. Entire hills were missing. A broad brown scar cut through the valley where a green forest used to stand. When they hiked in, They found trees snapped and stripped hundreds of feet above sea level. Using drone footage and laser scans, they reconstructed what had happened. A hidden megatsunami, nearly 650 feet high, one of the largest in modern times. But the wave struck an empty fjord. Had there been a village, a port, even a single fishing camp, it would have vanished without a trace. What made Taan Fiord different was its cause. It wasn't an earthquake or a volcano. It was climate change. As glaciers retreat, the ground beneath them loses support, making landslides more likely. Taan became a warning, silent but clear. As the planet warms, the conditions that created Lituya's monster wave are spreading. If a remote valley could unleash a wall of water, hundreds of feet high, what would happen when a slope above a populated coast fails? Or when a glacier the size of a city collapses straight into the sea? Because in 1792, across the Pacific, one mountain did just that. And its fall created one of the deadliest waves in Japan's history. In Japan's Nagasaki prefecture, spring had just begun. Fishermen along the Ariake Sea hauled in their morning catch, unaware that the mountain above them was already shifting. Mount Unzen, a quiet, forested peak, had been rumbling for weeks. The people of Shimabara were used to tremors. No one imagined what was coming. On the evening of May 21st, the volcano collapsed. The entire southwest flank of the mountain gave way, sending a torrent of earth, trees, and rock crashing toward the sea. It moved faster than any human could run, a landslide of unimaginable scale. When it hit the Lituya Bay, the impact hurled water outward in a towering surge. The first wave tore through the coastal town of Shimabara. Then as the displaced water rushed back, it crossed the bay and slammed into the opposite shore. Within minutes, a second wall of water, even higher than the first, returned and struck again. More than 15,000 people were killed. Villages disappeared beneath mud and salt water. Boats were lifted inland and crushed against the hillsides. It became Japan's deadliest volcanic disaster, a catastrophe born from both fire and water. In the centuries that followed, Unzen remained a warning carved into memory. Its story taught scientists that tsunamis can begin not only in the sea, but on the slopes above it. That what falls from the sky can lift the ocean from below. And yet, for all its horror, Unzen's destruction was confined to the bay. The water rose, raged, and fell. But it stayed within Japan's shores. 200 years later, the Earth would unleash a wave that refused to stay contained. A wave that didn't just erase towns. It rewrote the rules of global disaster. The date was December the 26th, 2004. And in a few quiet seconds beneath the Indian Ocean, the planet shifted, and the sea began to move. It was the morning after Christmas. The beaches of western Sumatra were waking up. Families gathered for breakfast. Fishermen prepared to launch their boats, and tourists watched the sunrise shimmer on the calm blue water. At 7:58 a.m., the sea began to tremble. No sound, no warning, just a pulse that rippled invisibly across the ocean floor. 6 miles beneath the surface, the Indo-Australian plate lurched beneath the Eurasian plate. In one violent motion, a slab of earth more than 1,000 miles long rose upward. The displacement pushed billions of tons of seawater skyward. It was one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded, magnitude 9.1, releasing energy equivalent to 23,000 Hiroshima bombs. The first wave struck the coast of Aceh within 20 minutes. Children playing on the shore ran toward the retreating tide, unaware that it was not a gift but a warning. Moments later, the ocean came back. A wall of water up to 167 feet high tore through homes, mosques, and fields. Entire neighborhoods vanished in seconds. But this tsunami did not stop at Sumatra. It raced outward across the Indian Ocean at the speed of a jetliner. In 2 hours, it reached Thailand. In 3, Sri Lanka. In 7, waves struck the coast of Africa. Beaches thousands of miles apart were hit by the same pulse of water, the same heartbeat of the earth. When the sea finally calmed, more than 230,000 lives were gone. It was not just the deadliest tsunami in modern history. It was the moment the world finally realized how vulnerable we all are. In the months that followed, satellites and scientists rewrote their maps. Nations built the first global tsunami warning system. New buoys were anchored across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, designed to detect even the faintest rise in sea level. The disaster changed how humanity listened to the planet. But the ocean had already given an earlier warning, one written in ash and fire over a century before. Because in 1883, another explosion of unimaginable power had sent waves racing across the same seas. Its name was Krakatoa, and when it erupted, the world itself seemed to scream. In the Sunda Strait between Java and Sumatra lies a quiet chain of volcanic islands. Today, they look ordinary. Green hills rising from a warm, tropical sea. But beneath them, the earth still remembers the day it tore itself apart. On the morning of August 27th, 1883, the volcano called Krakatoa erupted with a force that defied imagination. The first explosion shattered windows 200 miles away. The second leveled entire islands. And the third, so powerful it was heard 3,000 miles distant, split the mountain in two. The sound circled the planet 4 times. When the magma chamber collapsed, billions of tons of seawater rushed into the void. The result was a series of tsunamis up to 150 feet high, racing toward the coasts of Java and Sumatra. Coastal villages were swept away in moments. Boats were thrown miles inland. More than 36,000 people were killed. Ash rose 20 miles into the atmosphere and blotted out the sun. For months, sunsets around the world burned blood red. Painters in London captured skies they had never seen before. Temperatures dropped across the globe, but even after the mountain vanished, it was not gone. In 1927, the sea began to boil again, a new cone rising from the depths, named Anak Krakatau, the child of Krakatoa. And in 2018, that child collapsed in a smaller eruption, generating another deadly tsunami that struck Indonesia's coast. The cycle had begun again. Krakatoa proved something unsettling. The ocean's greatest waves are not always born from the sea, but from the deep breath of the planet beneath it. And as we've seen, those breaths are growing heavier, because from Alaska's melting glaciers to the restless Pacific Rim, Earth's pulse is quickening. Scientists are racing to understand it, and to prepare for the next great surge. Every tsunami begins the same way, with a sudden displacement, a shove. Something moves that shouldn't. Rock, ice, or seafloor, each one capable of lifting billions of tons of water in an instant. But not all waves are created equal. The run-up height, the measure of how high the water climbs on land, is only part of the story. The other half is energy, how far that energy can travel. Lituya Bay's wave was tall but short-lived, a vertical wall trapped in a fjord. The Indian Ocean's wave, though smaller, carried its power across entire continents. That difference is what turns a record into a catastrophe. Today, the ocean is under watch like never before. Hundreds of dart buoys sit anchored across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, each one listening for the faintest rise in sea level. Satellites measure surface displacement in real time. Supercomputers model how a pulse of energy will move from the seafloor to the shore. And yet, for all our data, one thing remains constant. We cannot stop the ocean from rising when the planet decides to move. Scientists warn that melting glaciers and collapsing slopes may soon trigger new megatsunamis in Greenland, Alaska, or the Himalayas, places where warming air and unstable rock meet deep water. The same physics that stripped Lituya's mountains bare still exists. Only now, it's happening faster. Our best defense is awareness and time, because unlike the people of 1883 or 2004, we may actually have the chance to run. Most tsunamis go unseen. The world remembers the ones that reach our shores, but far beyond human sight, dozens more rise and fade each year in silence. In the deep trenches of the Pacific, a landslide can fall, a glacier can collapse, or a meteor can strike, and no one would ever know. Only the instruments record them. Small, momentary lifts in ocean pressure, fractions of an inch across thousands of miles. A blip on a satellite feed, a whisper in the data. Scientists call them ghost waves, tsunamis that never touch land, that wander the open sea until friction and distance pull them apart. They are reminders that the ocean is always moving, even when we see stillness on the surface. And sometimes, when those ghost waves meet the right coast, or travel through narrow straits, they can grow again. A distant event reborn thousands of miles away. For every wave we record, there are 10 that pass unnoticed. And for every warning siren that sounds, there are countless others that never needed to. But each one carries a story of earth breathing. Slow, deep, and unstoppable. Even as we look back, scientists are already watching the future. Beneath the Pacific and the Atlantic, new tensions are building. Slow fractures, invisible but immense. The Cascadia subduction zone, stretching from Northern California to British Columbia, is one of them. Locked plates grind together there, silent for more than 3 centuries. When they finally slip, experts say a tsunami could reach the American coast in 15 minutes, submerging entire towns in a single surge. Across the ocean, the Sunda Arc of Indonesia, home to Krakatoa's legacy, continues to deform under pressure. And in the Mediterranean, the same fault lines that destroyed Lisbon in 1755 are still alive, capable of sending waves racing through the Strait of Gibraltar once more. Even the Arctic is no longer immune. As glaciers collapse, fjords once frozen year-round are becoming unstable, their cliffs softened by meltwater and time. Each thawed valley becomes another potential launch point for a megatsunami like Taan fjords. The question is no longer if the ocean will rise again. It's where, and perhaps more hauntingly, when. Because somewhere beneath our feet, the pressure is already building. And as history shows, the sea never stays still for long. The ocean gives life, but it never promises mercy. From Alaska's silent fjords to the islands of Indonesia, each of these 5 tsunamis was a message. A reminder of how thin the line is between calm and chaos. Lituya Bay showed us the height of nature's force. The Indian Ocean showed us its reach. And together they tell one truth. The sea remembers. Every wave begins as a whisper beneath our feet, a shifting of rock or ice that no one hears until it's too late. But every story we learn, every warning buoy we anchor, and every coastline we map gives us another chance to listen, to understand the deep before it speaks again. If this journey into Earth's extremes moved you, subscribe for more stories from the deep. Because somewhere, far below, the next wave is already forming.